Welcome to Rethinking Freedom. I am Aya Fubaranelli, your host. This is not just a show, it's a call to rise above your limitations and to embrace freedom in every aspect of your life. But today, our focus is on the upcoming elections in the United States of America. We know we have viewers all over the world. And what happens in America actually impacts many people across the globe. So let's dive in. I'm really excited about our show today because you are going to be hearing from a variety of voices. You're going to hear an interview that I did impromptu with Beto O'Rourke. Some of you may remember him as a presidential candidate at one point. He's also run for U.S. Senator here in the state of Texas, where I reside. And he was in our community in Bell County, Texas, knocking on doors, helping to bring people out, encouraging the local candidates. And so you're going to hear a very short interview that I was able to get with him. You're also going to hear from Stuart Whitlow. Stuart Whitlow is a first-time candidate for political office. He's a semi-retired attorney who is running to represent the state of Texas in Congress. And so we also were able to do a very impromptu interview with him as well, and grateful for the chance to be able to for him to share his story with all of you, our viewers. We also were at the polls because we're out and about. This is one of the most important elections of my lifetime. If I had been born in the 1960s, those elections would have been more important. But right now, what is at stake is literally our freedom, wherever you fall on the political spectrum. And I happen to be one of those people who's considered an independent. I don't mark myself as a Republican or a Democrat. I look at the issues, and I look at the issues that concern me and my community and that advance humanity as a whole. And that is what I actually try to focus on. And I look for what the solutions are that each candidate is pushing to see who will actually get my vote. And so what we were able to do, and you're going to be able to see in this episode, is we were out at the polls and we interviewed some of the people who were voting, one of them being Dionne Dukes, who is a first-time voter, so first time ever voting, and you'll get to hear the interview that we did with him and his mother. And then finally, we were also very fortunate to get the amazing Casandra Welchlin to join us. And we also interviewed her not just about what's happening locally, because I believe all politics is local. And so, yes, I'm focusing on the community that I live in, but also understanding how this goes nationally and beyond. And so she's based in Mississippi, and she was able to pull together why we should all vote at this time. So again, thank you for joining us. Please listen and share this with as many people as possible, because literally the issues at hand right now can shape what this country looks like for decades to come.
Whether a woman can make her own decisions about her own body, all of that is literally on the ballot. So I'm so glad you asked the question, because some people say, well, this is theoretical or academic. No, this is your life. And in some cases, this is life and death. And I'll tell you this, Bell County, like so many other parts of Texas that aren't Austin or Dallas or Houston or, you know, the typical places for either Republicans or Democrats, it is not really represented effectively by those in power, because they typically don't have much of a contest. And even Democrats, not those here in this county, but Democrats outside, seem to write it off as well. So to see people like Jennifer Lee, who is fighting so hard for this community, Don Richardson, the folks who are running for county attorney, state board of education, U.S. Congress, to see them fighting here, regardless of whether there's a cavalry coming to the rescue behind them, is so inspiring to me. And that's why I'm out here knocking on doors, greeting voters, and reminding folks that their vote is the greatest single power we have in a democracy, and we want to make sure that we use it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for highlighting all of the people who are running locally and what is at stake. Is there anything else that you feel like you need to say to anybody right now who's still saying, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I don't want these labels? I think the parties are the same. That's something that we keep hearing. The parties are the same. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. Listen, democracy is not easy, right? Getting registered to vote, casting the ballot, it's actually harder to do that in Texas.
It is.
Than it is anywhere else. And it's because those in power want to stay in power, and they want to keep those who are out of power from ever gaining it. It's natural. Republicans do it in Texas, Democrats do it in other states, okay? This is a human issue, not a party issue. But I'll say this, as tough as democracy might be, it's not something you have to worry about in Russia or Iran or North Korea or China or these other places. You can just go along in your life and never have to worry about who represents you or how your government is run. But in this extraordinary experiment, 248 years in, that was won not because anyone gave it to us, but because service members put their lives on the line, lost those lives, civil rights marchers put their lives on the line, lost those lives. Americans bequeathed this to this generation. We don't get to keep it for another 248 years or even another 2 years unless we fight for it. And part of fighting for it is literally voting. And so I just, in honor of a community that epitomizes service to country perhaps more than any other in America, where we are right now, you and I talking, I just want to make sure that we honor that sacrifice and service that came before us and do our part. And it begins with, it doesn't end with, it begins with voting.
It begins with voting. I do want to say this. I was talking to someone who's about my age who was reticent to vote, and I said, wouldn't it be horrible? Wouldn't it be crazy? Wouldn't it be insane that our generation is the first generation to leave the next generation with less rights than we were given? So right now, as a woman, my daughters have less rights to their bodies than I had when I was their age. And that's a tragedy, and that's something that we all should be working to make sure it doesn't happen. So thank you again for your leadership, for the way you've consistently shown up. I don't know how you balanced it all, but you're everywhere all at the same time. And you just coming into our community means a lot to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It means a lot to me, and I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Whitlow, it is a pleasure to get a moment to sit down with you. Well, of course, we're here with the rally with Beto and so excited about what's happening in Bell County. But I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to our listeners and to let them know what you're running for and what your background is. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm running for U.S. Congress. I'm running in the 31st District against the incumbent John Carter, who's seeking to be there for his 23rd and 24th years, all the way up.
The invisible John Carter? I don't
That's
think
it.
we've
Yeah,
seen him in a while.
he's hard to find. Although we had an article come out in the Austin American Statesman yesterday, and or his staff or someone managed to give some responses, and so.
Okay. But
it was a pretty nice article. I appreciate it. It was good. But I'm been in this district a lot. My family's been in this district a long time. I think they've been good citizens, and but they've been here since like the 1880s, 1890s, and they over in Bartlett and Holland, Texas, and that's where my parents were. My great grandfather started the first rural electric co-op in the nation under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Believe it or not,
Wow.
And it's still there in Bartlett, Texas, operating to this very day.
So you come from a long line of people who are trying to make our community better.
I truly believe that. My father was known as the poor man's banker. He was a banker there in Round Rock. I was raised there when it was a smaller town, about 2,500 people. Of course, now it's about 150,000. But he was, people would say, if you can't get a loan anywhere else, go talk to N.G. Bunky Whitlow. Whitlow, my father.
Still in business?
He's not. He passed away. He passed away. Yeah.
I missed that window.
My cousin's a banker over in Granger, Dan Johnson, over that First National Bank of Granger. So you might check him.
Okay.
Check in with him. Real great guy. But anyway, so yes, I think my family, my mother was a community person. They were more conservative politically, but they just believe that you take care of your community, and you take care of the people that are struggling, and that's certainly what they did.
So why would you decide to get into this race? I mean, I'm sure you have a life, other things you could be doing.
I certainly do, and I have two sons. They're 20 and 22, and they're here on this back of this card. They're both in college, and I do talk to them and enjoy talking to them. But I was very concerned about the perilous nature of our democracy, something that Beto was just talking about very beautifully. But so I was working at a place called the Texas Legal Services Center. I've been there for the last 5 years, serving low-income folks, and that was very gratifying. And I was having a good time. But I said, I could retire and run for office full-time and try to help with this political situation that we're in, or I could do whatever. So I ended up talking to Rep. James Tallarico, who's a top state representative there in Austin. He said, no, I think you need to run against John Carter. And so we talked about that. I ultimately decided to do that. it was just the difficult times we're in. We're seeing that this election, of course, is pretty all the way around. It's tight and it's concerning. And so, I've been thinking about running pretty much most of my adult life. And so this was I said, well, now it's time for you to put your feet where your mouth is and get out there and do it. And that we've been running since December. We've been running very hard. I've got like 6 staff members. And so our campaign is a full-fledged.
So what are the issues that you're running on?
Well, of course, democracy, as we've already discussed. Reproductive rights for women, of course, very important. This has just been a disaster, what's happened, and we need to get that back on track. And if I get to D.C., I will work to codify Roe v. Wade into the U.S. legal statute, because the Supreme Court of the United States is clearly not going to be any help in that regard. And so we're gonna go with that. Of course, gun violence is a absolutely serious matter it's just absolutely become absurd and also heartbreaking.
It's amazing to me that we have all these book bans because we're so concerned about the students, the children, but we will do nothing regarding guns. No restrictions at all. No one. I own a gun. I definitely believe in our Second Amendment rights, but we care so much about the kids, and I'm like, how many children are checking out whatever books you claim it is you're protecting them from? But I have children who almost every month they're going through some kind of shooter drill or something, and we would do nothing in that area. So I'm glad that you said that's one of your issues. This
is exactly right. We're more afraid that they might read some racy or sounding sentence in a book, possibly, than worrying about keeping them safe in their schools. And I've had instances where just a couple of weeks ago, my older son's down in college at UTSA in San Antonio, and I get this text saying, by the way, we're having a shooting incident at the apartment complex. I mean, luckily, I was very lucky. I called him. He said, Dad, I'm okay. I know what you're calling me for. On the other hand, it was, of course, relieving to me that he was okay. Yeah. But people go through this all the time. And of course, so many people make those calls, and there's nobody answering the phone on the end of the line. And and my younger son had the same thing in his high school where there was a gun incident there. And so it's just, it impacts all of us, although I've been lucky personally. Yeah. But yes, it's
and just the stress on our kids. But I know I interrupted you. What are the other issues that you are?
Inflation is a huge issue for people, and I'm definitely looking at that very seriously and wanting to increase our investigation efforts to find out where is this price gouging coming from?
Where is the price gouging?
Yes, and who do we need to get after and prosecute for this? Because the Federal Reserve has lowered the interest rates. I think they've made the decision. Well, the inflation is not coming from the system, from the economic system, but otherwise they would not have lowered the interest rates by a half point. They went more than a quarter point, and so. I think what they've realized is that whatever inflation is still going on is because of price gouging and that sort of thing. And people trying to make a buck, big bucks, big corporations, when they think they can blame it all on the pandemic and whatever.
Or on one party or the other.
They can blame it on somebody else and just kind of, but in the meanwhile, make millions of dollars off of it and really take money out of people's pockets that people desperately need. And this is a serious issue. And so that's of course, I am concerned about immigration. I mean, I think that the Biden administration has gotten it more under control here recently. Of course, we had that bill that passed.
It
didn't pass.
It should have passed.
It should have passed. It was the Republicans and Democrats got together. They came up with a very
bipartisan bill.
Very serious bill. And of course, Trump called down and said, "Wait a minute. If y'all pass that, the immigration problem is going to be over."
And I want to have something to run on.
Exactly. What can I talk about? So just ridiculous. Once again, Trump worrying about himself. And my opponent, John Carter, unfortunately, voted in 2021, January 6th, that famous day, to decertify the vote for Joseph Biden. And that was one thing that really, talk about why did I run, that was one thing that really influenced me.
Because at some point it really needs to be country over party. And right is right and wrong is wrong. And if we're going to instill values in our children, how do we teach them one thing and do something different?
They're watching and they're listening.
Yes, they are.
And they know.
You know this as a parent.
Yes, absolutely. And I know my father once asked my brother and I, he was kind of frustrated with us because he thought we were more liberal than we should be. We were like in college. And he said, how did you guys get so concerned about the poor? And of course, this is coming from the poor man's banker asking us that question. We just looked at him and kind of stared. And he got a little angry at first, but then he realized, okay, you got it from me. From my actions.
Yeah. And you know what, by the way, that's why I think that these buckets of you're a liberal or you're a conservative are not helpful at all. Because when it comes down to what we all want, we want safe neighborhoods. You want to be able to make a living. You want to be able to enjoy your life. You want your children to be able to prosper and so on. I mean, I don't care what color, gender, whatever, sexuality, we all want the same things. And so when you put people in those buckets, it prevents us from actually being able to have conversations that allow us to build together as a nation. This idea of the zero-sum mentality, either you have a lot and I have nothing, or I have a lot and you have nothing, where there actually is enough for everybody.
Really is.
So it's wonderful to have someone like you with your sensibilities running for this office, particularly because party affiliation or not, although I'm looking at what people do when they are in office, when you're not even showing up for the people. I've lived in this in Bell County for 15 years, and pretty much the only time I hear that John Carter's around is maybe when he goes to Fort Cavazos. But in terms of who he is serving and what we need, I've gone to town hall meetings, he doesn't show up, and so on and so forth. And so you will show up, right?
Absolutely. He is really invisible. I will have town meetings. I've handed out the cards with my phone number on them. It's 737-346-1839. That's my personal mobile phone. If you want to call me, and I'll talk to you and I'll represent you in Washington. John, he talks big about it. He supports the military and our veterans. I've actually known John was a town lawyer in Round Rock back when I was like 14 years old. So I've known him all the way back there. Practiced law in front of him as a judge, and he's. Trump says all kind of things about our military and our veterans that are just despicable. He goes after John McCain, who was a Republican. And what do you hear from John Carter? Silence. He never stands up he could at least stand up and say, Mr. President or Mr. Trump, I'm your supporter, but I do not agree with these things you're saying about our military and our veterans. But we don't even hear that. It's just crickets, nothing. So that's very disturbing to me.
So for those who want to learn more about you, because they are going to go out and vote, today is October 31st. We have today and tomorrow for early voting. Possibly by the time you see this, maybe early voting might be over. But we definitely have November 5th as our election day.
Yes, we do.
Where can they find out more information about you?
You can go to whitlowforcongress.com. That's WHITLOW, and it's FOR, Congress, not the number 4, .com. And you can learn more. And there's also I will say there's a donate button. And if you want to hit that, we are spending lots of money here all along, but particularly here at the end. So we could certainly use an infusion of some funds. But yes, you can learn more about me there. I will say, I was in the joint program in law and public affairs at UT, and graduated with honors from the law school. And so, I'm proud of that. And then went on to become a lawyer. And hopefully, as one of my judge friend says, he's a Court of Appeals judge, he was, and he says, Stuart, people don't in general like attorneys very much. You may have picked up on that a little bit yourself, but he says,
we make the world go round.
He also said they like their own lawyers quite often. And he said, I bet your clients really liked you. And I said, in general, yes, they did. Yeah. And he said, so just tell people in DC, you're going to be their lawyer. And you'll be an excellent, and that is exactly right. That's exactly what I'll be doing. Is I've given you my phone number. If you think I'm not doing it, give me a call, send me a text, whatever. We'll talk about it, and we'll get it resolved. And I didn't know you were an attorney, so attorney to attorney. How about that?
it's my side hustle. In real life, I want to be a farmer. So
seriously?
Yeah. That's really what I want to do. I just don't have the money to get all the land and do all the stuff.
And
I still have to pay for kids to go to school. So
all my great-great-grandfather, great-grandfather, all farmers, and on both sides of my family.
Oh wow!
One of them had nice, rich black farmland, and they did very well. The other one had kind of a scrabble, some scrabble.
The soil makes all the difference.
Absolutely, yeah. They had a bigger struggle, but they got through it, and they were salty good folks. Yeah.
I appreciate you taking time to talk with us here at Rethinking Freedom. We're all about freedom. And I will say this, he does need you to click that donate button. People often say speech is free. Yes, you have free speech, but the marketplace is expensive. So please go ahead, check him out. And if he's someone that you want to support, click that donate button. And thank you again.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so Donnie, we're out here at the Harker Heights polling site. And I see you have a button on that says I voted. Is this your first election, or have you voted before?
It's my first time.
This is your first time. So tell me, what made you decide to vote? Because there are a lot of people who are not showing up to vote. Why are you here?
Just being the opportunity of being of age, being my age now, I can vote. So I'm being able to vote is just one step ahead.
When you think about what's happening in the country and the reason why you want your voice heard, why was that important to you? Because many people your age are not voting.
More about women's rights and things of that nature.
All right. Okay, so we have a man who is concerned about women's rights. I'm glad to hear that. Is this your mother behind me over here?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to pan around a little bit over here. So, ma'am,
Yes, ma'am.
you raised a young man who is out here voting for the first time.
Absolutely. He drove in from Dallas. Did he tell you that?
No.
This morning he didn't have school today, so he drove in from Dallas, him and his older sister, to vote.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you serious?
Of course.
You made sure that you made that trip. And for those who don't know, we're in Harker Heights, so that was what, a 2.5-hour trip
Yes, ma'am.
to get here this morning to vote. So, Mom,
Proud.
what I was gonna say, you've got to be proud.
Yes, ma'am.
What can you tell other parents though who have young people who right now are kind of like, oh, I'm young, I'm not voting, or they're just not paying attention to what's going on?
I mean, if you can wait in a line to get some Jordans and you can wait in line to get everything else, why not wait in line to cast your vote and make sure you vote for the right person?
All right, all right. So what are the issues that are important to you in this election?
It was actually women's rights. It was like, no one should tell me how to do anything when it comes to my body. So that was one of the things that stood out to me. And then the hatred that's going on that, other people are spewing, that upset me because that's not how I was raised. Like my aunt and my dad got arrested when they marched with the Reverend Martin Luther King.
Wow.
In Grenada, Mississippi. I have to put that out there.
Wow.
So you can go look it up. It's in the history books. Her name's Rosie Washington. My dad's name is Edmund Washington Jr. And we've always had the community, whether it was my grandmother on my mother's side, she used to feed Jesse Jackson. So
wow.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you come from a long line. You understand that there was blood, sweat, and tears that
Absolutely.
allowed us to get these rights to vote.
Absolutely.
And we need to we need to exercise that right.
Yes, ma'am.
And what's your name?
My name's Tracy Dukes.
Tracy. Okay, so there's someone out there who's still saying, I don't know that it matters. What would you say?
It does matter. Every vote counts. So every vote matters. I've been posting it all week. I actually volunteered for the first time, to be out here to pass out any literature that someone might need.
What will you tell people? Why should they come out and vote?
Because it's your right. It's your right. And if you want to stand for something, you come out here and vote. Or you're going to fall for anything. And you see other people are falling for the rhetoric that's going on in this world. Don't be that person.
Thank you. This is our amazing guest who I am so excited that we were able to get on the air with us today, Casandra Welchlin. And I want to say this, I'm so profoundly thankful, grateful that with everything that you have going on right now during this election cycle, that you've taken time out to talk with us, to talk with our viewers. So let me just give a little bit of a bio on her. It will not be exhaustive at all, but she is the executive director and co-convener of the Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable, a daughter of the South, raised in Jackson, Mississippi, and as a mother and a wife, and she's a mother of 3 children, so we might have another show later, has figured out how to balance this whole motherhood and activism and working and all of that, because I feel like some days I'm about to fall off the bike. She holds an undergraduate degree in social work from Jackson State University. My mother is also a social worker, so near and dear to my heart. A proud member of Delta Sigma Theta. You better know, and if you don't know,
yes, ma'am.
And she also has a master's from Brandeis University at the Heller School for Social Policy and Management. And the degrees are great, but what this woman has done with her degrees, because so many of us have degrees, but the question is, what are we doing with them? She's an advocate, she's an organizer, she's an agent for change, positive change. Her work spans over 20 years, reforming public policy and organizing for power. And can I emphasize the over 20 years? Because so many of us start and we sputter and we die off for different reasons. I mean, it's stressful. It's a lot of work. And so thank you for your steadfastness and for raising that next generation. She has been featured in national, statewide, and local media outlets such as Bloomberg Law and Mississippi Today and NPR and all of the shows. and she is on Rethinking Freedom today. And she has so many awards. Please, we're going to put in the comment section where you can go and see, learn more information about her. But we wanted to use this time to let her speak and to share her wisdom with us. And so, welcome to Rethinking Freedom.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to see how, things really move and bring how, connections are made in the unexplainable ways. And so I'm just so glad that, you reached out and I was able to be part of this.
Thank you so much. So, this is the question. It's November 4th. If you're not here in the United States of America, this is the day before the quote unquote actual election day. Now, in some places, there's been early voting. Early voting has ended in just about everywhere that I know of. In Mississippi, I understand you all don't even believe in early voting at all. But what I'm asking you today is to speak to those people. It's the eve of Election Day 2024 in the United States of America. Why should people vote in this election?
People should vote because elections have consequences, and they have consequences whether we want to admit it or not admit it, or know it or not know it. But there are consequences to our kitchen tables. There are consequences to our children's future related to education. There are consequences to if our mothers, our Black women, are going to live or going to die because they don't have adequate health insurance, or we have, regressive policies that bans women from making the choice related to their bodies. These are the kinds of consequences that will happen if we don't show up to the polls. I was always taught that there are good consequences and there are bad consequences, depending on what your behavior, is, what you choose to do. And so we know that, particularly, as I think about it here in Mississippi and in the South, where we have the most Black people living is in the South.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
it's also in the South where we have some of the highest poverty rates. We have some of the most, regressive voting rights laws. We have, Black women are, making or graduating at high levels. However, our economic security don't match that. And so there's something to say about that. And I also want to say that we owe it to our children, and we owe it to the history that was made that gave us this right. Particularly, I'm thinking, I'm with the Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable, and Black women have always been a part of every political, social, environmental movement in this country. And Black women show up and vote. And we don't just show up and vote, we bring our families and our communities with us. But when we don't do that, then there are consequences, right? And so to me, people need to show up because our kitchen tables matter. And we saw what happened, during COVID-19, where people lost jobs, people lost lives, family members lost, family members. And we can't afford to be in a place to where we don't have a say so. And so the ballot gives us a say so. And so people, it's just really not an option. You've got to go exercise your right to vote.
Well, I thank you so much for saying that. I don't know who needs to hear it any clearer, but you know what? I did ask a few people just on social media. I said, you know what? I understand that there's still people concerned and saying they have all these reasons why they don't vote or why they're not going to vote. So if you don't mind, I'm going to throw out some of those reasons. And if you would just give us, whatever response you think people what people should be thinking about in regards to this. So I'm pulling it up. One of the respondents said, well, I don't vote because the decision has already been made who's going to win. and it doesn't matter if I vote or not. It doesn't count.
That's a lie. And that's really deception. And let's talk about one, I think misinformation. And then let's talk about like where does that thought pattern come from for us to believe that? Why do we believe that? So I have been doing this work for a really long time. And I have known campaigns, people running for office and have lost elections by 2 votes in their communities. I can go on. People have lost elections. Good people who really care about the issues of our households. They care about, putting money in our pocketbooks. They care about making sure that our elders have, drug prescriptions. They care about ensuring that blight is gone away from our communities and potholes are filled. And they were the best candidates, but they lost by 10 votes. They lost by 20 votes. So 1 vote matters. So that is the truth of the matter. And we got to believe that 1 vote does matter. So that's misinformation. And those are myths. Those are not truths.
I often tell people, because, unfortunately, we're not teaching truth in our schools anymore here in Texas. They passed the anti-CRT bill, which is really another way of saying we don't want the truth taught in the schools. Because if we don't teach the truth, then people can't see how we're repeating the same things that we're actually ashamed of being taught. But I often ask people, if your vote doesn't matter at all, why is there such a concerted effort to ensure that you don't vote? Why are all of these additional hurdles put in the path of voting? I was talking to someone in a court the other day, and I said, it's amazing to me how we can do trillions of dollars of transactions through the computer, right? Through the internet, through technology. But our voting is way back in just in terms of technology that we're using and how people have to show up and all of the things that have been put in place to prevent us from voting. So if your vote didn't count, if it doesn't make a difference, they wouldn't be trying so hard to make sure that you couldn't vote. There must be a reason why initially Black and brown people couldn't vote. Actually, initially, the majority of people in America could not vote. It was wealthy white men. That was it.
Right.
Women,
right.
You couldn't vote.
That's right.
Men, Black men, Hispanic men, Asian men, all of that, you couldn't vote. Let's not talk about transgendered and so on and so forth. And people thinking that we cannot go back then to that time. I tell them, if it took a stroke of a pen to give us these rights, guess what? The wrong people in the right place, it can be a stroke of a pen again. Many of us never thought we would live to see Roe v. Wade overturned.
Correct.
But here I am, a mother of daughters, and they have less rights and autonomy over their bodies than I had when I was their age. So these things can happen. So what would you say to that?
Oh, yeah, it's so true. So, Frederick Douglass, he said, power just doesn't give up. You got to put a demand on it. And when we see all of these tactics being used, we do have to ask ourselves, why is that? Why aren't, people coming out of poverty? Why are moms still working 2 and 3 jobs? Why people who have been in the criminal justice system still not able to vote, right? Why is that? Because we understand if you restore those voting rights back to folks that have been incarcerated, we're talking about a huge pool of voters that can really change, elections, for the better of their families and their communities. And so it matters. And what I will also say is, we just celebrated Freedom Summer, or just, commemorated Freedom Summer in Mississippi, right? Where folks came from the north to the south to help us get folks registered to vote and to fight for our voting rights. So that was 60 years ago. And Fannie Lou Hamer,
Annie Lou
uh,
Hamer. Yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
60 years to the day, right, of when Kamala Harris accepted her nomination to be president. She made, the speech before the National Democratic, the DNC
Yes.
convention,
Yeah.
and to really say, she questioned America that she should have her rights to vote. So that was 60 years ago.
Okay.
And we are still here without representation, without access to the polls. Like you said, here in Mississippi, we don't have early voting. We have absentee voting, which means that we can vote in person or we can vote, with the ballot absentee based on, an excuse. We're not able to make the polls on election day. So we have that, but we cannot just go, we don't have early voting. We don't have online voting. So what that means is people have 12 hours in a day to go cast their votes. So let's break that
Wait,
down
wait,
for
wait.
you.
On a day that is not a holiday where people have off work. Okay, I'm
Correct.
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Correct. And employers are supposed to let employees off work to go vote, but that may not always be told. And if you're working for an employer that don't respect um, families and don't respect, these laws and don't respect giving, families, paid time off or, all of those things, then it prevents them. So let's just take it for a moment. Let's take, a mom who is working two jobs. So somehow she has to get her kid to school and she's working during the day, but then she has to get off work at about 4 o'clock and to try to go vote. But then she has a nighttime job at about 7 o'clock. So, but childcare is over because it closes down over here most of the time at about 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Night care is few and in between here. And so she has to find childcare for that child. She still got to find a place, find something for the child to eat. And there may be one or two children. Transportation is an issue, which means gas. But if she's working at two jobs, that means that she doesn't have enough money to take care of all of those things. And so these are impediments and barriers, to getting access to the polls. And so her one vote might have made a difference, but she's tired, she's overwhelmed. And so she's looking at what's the priority? Going to my job so that I can feed my kids and keep a car and keep a roof over my head. What's the priority? I'm going to choose that. And so it makes no sense it makes no sense to us that we don't have more days and more weeks to go cast our ballots. But the system was designed as it was designed for those that want to stay in power. And we really got to change our mindset around that to really know this is a strategy that's put there because they don't want you to show up and cast your ballot, which will make them get out of power. So that's it.
So I'm going to ask you one more question here, and then just ask you to give your closing arguments, if you will, for why people should vote. So the other thing that I sometimes hear is it really doesn't matter who I vote for, in the sense that nothing changes. I've had this party, I've had that party, I've had this person who looks this way, I've had this person who looks this way in power, in leadership, and my situation maybe not only hasn't changed for the better, it might have changed for the worse. So why even bother? And these are hard conversations to have because it's coming from a place of pain but
Absolutely.
they're really asking. And sometimes when people ask that question, people want to just dismiss them. I don't want to
Yeah.
dismiss anybody and their concerns in this cycle or any other cycle or in any aspect of life. Now, folk who just want to be argumentative for the sake of argument, I don't have time for you. But for people
Yeah.
who are generally saying, you know what, I was catching hell before, I was catching hell, I'm catching hell now. What guarantee are you giving me that I'm not going to catch hell tomorrow?
Yeah. So that you're right. This is a complicated conversation, particularly for those that are, trying to just make ends meet. and have been caused by so much pain and feel downtrodden. So I'll say this again, the system was designed to do just that, to beat you down, to make you feel as if you can't get ahead, to make you feel that you can't live out your dream and you can't have any joy. It was designed in that way. And so if everybody gives up, then we don't get anywhere. So I have seen, and we have seen where there has been, hope. There is some hope. Even if it's not your situation, I'm sure there has been somewhere along the way where someone has come along and, provided some kind of support. Your heart has broken for someone else. There's always hope in the midst of these storms. And we got to look back at the end of the day, this country was not designed for us to have access, to have freedoms. It just wasn't. But if all of us give up, then we will continue to be there. So somebody got to come along and continue, to show up. One time, we just got to show up, even for our children. We got to be able to just show up, because if we don't, we will continue there. But we can point to where things have gotten better. And so what I'll just say is, we can't not continue to have that mindset, even though I know it can be hard. But we just got to show up and do our part, because everyone is connected to this fabric that we call community, that we call family, that we call the United States of America. And it can't be done by just a few. We all have to come and be a part of that change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again. Anything else that you would like to share as we wrap up our time together, this time together, because there will be other times, because what you're doing with the Black Women's Roundtable in Mississippi is actually, I think, a model that other communities need to look at and see how we try to reproduce the same thing in our communities. This idea of waiting till the year of an election to get going,
Yeah,
is not working for us, because these
correct.
issues they're evergreen. And so we really need to have entities in place where we are consistently working on this. And it's not just about voting, that's just one part of it. But after we vote, whoever is in power, it is how we now exert, put pressure on that person or on those, entities to ensure that we're getting what we need. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. So yes, any
Exactly.
final thoughts that you have for us?
All I want to say is that, this election is so key. You're right. We have to be able to, in Mississippi, we have elections every year. So this isn't just a one-time thing. We have to be prepared to continue to educate, continue to engage people, go and knock on doors. What I say, go sit on folks' front porch and eat and drink some sweet tea and eat some hot grits. Like, we just got to be in community with one another. This election, we cannot not sit out. We have to participate in it, because it is things like, we don't want to see any more Black mamas, dying because they didn't have access to health care, or they weren't believed, or that the hospital room or the emergency room was closed. We don't want to see any more of our children, being killed on the street due to gun violence, because so many guns are on the street and Congress won't act, right, to pass smart and safe gun rights, gun laws. We cannot sit back and allow that to happen. And so we want to see our communities thrive. And so it is important that we, show up this election. I urge everyone, your vote is your voice. And if you are not at the table, you are at the menu, and you're going to let somebody else choose for you. Don't let nobody else choose for you. Use your power, and your power is in your vote.
Thank you so much to the absolutely phenomenal Cassandra Welchlin. It's such a pleasure to have you here. I look forward to continuing conversation with you and truly learning from what you all are doing in Mississippi and supporting what you're doing there, because we're all connected, and none of us
We're all connected.
none of us is free if all of us is if none no one is free if one of us is not free. I think that's how
That's
it.
correct.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you so much. Thank you again for
Thank
joining
you.
Rethinking Freedom. On the eve of an election that could very well shape the trajectory of this country and rewrite history, rewrite our future, rewrite what kind of lives our children get to live, it's imperative that we all take a moment to quiet down the noise and to really pay attention to what's at stake here. This isn't just about casting ballots, and it's certainly not about party affiliation. None of us was born stamped with any party on our bodies, on our minds. These are things that have been contrived. At issue here is what happens to people. Where do we stand in terms of our common humanity? Cesar Chavez once said that the fight is never about grapes or lettuce. It is always about people. And the choice we all have to make, those of us who are eligible to vote in the United States of America, comes down to where we stand on humanity, on people. It's about our neighbors. It's about our communities. It's about the people we love. And it's even about the people we don't know and that we may even have a lot of differences with. It's ultimately about rethinking freedom. What does it really mean to be free in this country, in your city, in your state, and then what we project to the rest of the world? There is a reason that there have been so many barriers to voting. As we have previously addressed during this episode, there are reasons why, from the inception of this nation, not everyone had the right to vote. And as Ida B. Wells says, the price for freedom is eternal vigilance. Because if you ever think that you are free, but you don't protect that freedom, you just may be stripped of it. Fannie Lou Hamer, as I have previously stated, reminded us that nobody's free until everybody is free. This isn't a passive freedom. It doesn't just happen. We are free when we choose to stand for freedom for everyone, not just for ourselves, but for our collective humanity. And voting in this nation is one of the ways that we make our voices heard and that we secure our freedom. It's one of the ways that we ensure that elected officials, the people charged with making laws and making policies that affect every aspect of our lives, from the day we are conceived till long after we are dead, these laws and policies dictate what happens to our bodies, what access we have to health care, to living wages, to places we can live, to education, the ability to work, to enjoy ourselves, and quite frankly, just to live. For Hispanic, African American, Native American, and other marginalized peoples, including women, voting isn't just a right. Voting isn't just something that, oh, if I feel like exercising it, I should, and when I don't feel like it, I won't. It's literally the thing that keeps us alive, that keeps us having options. So many in our communities have fought for so long to ensure that you and I today have a choice as to whether we go and cast our votes and whom we cast our votes for. We must think carefully about the kind of world we want to create. Dolores Huerta, civil rights activist, said, and I quote, "If people don't vote, everything stays the same." Actually, I would add, things might get worse. You can protest until the sky turns yellow or the moon turns blue, and it's not going to change anything if you don't vote. Women fought for the right to vote, and through their votes, were able to secure autonomy over their bodies, were able to get into schools and get educated, were able to access jobs. Women are still fighting for equal pay for equal work. Of course, the same is true for African Americans, for Native Americans. You know, the irony of where we are today, particularly as people talk about immigration, is the fact that the very borders of this country traversed Mexican territory. Or we can go even further than that. The very land that we're fighting for and on belonged to the Native American people. Here in Texas, where I reside, the very word Texas originates from Native American people. And of course, November happens to be Native American Month, a designation that is very recent. I believe it was 1990 by George W. Bush. And yet this is their land. And so for us to now talk about who we want to keep in or let in and who we want to keep out and who we're going to deport, without looking at the facts of the matter, that this is a nation of immigrants, and that the only people that really have the right to say stay or leave are the Native Americans, whom we continue to strip of their rights, whom we continue to betray treaties that were once passed. As a woman, I think of reproductive rights. As someone raised in the Christian church, as a woman who experienced 4 miscarriages herself, I understand the sanctity of life. I also understand that what you believe and what you want for yourself is wonderful, but does not give you the right to impose your views, your values on anybody else. Our votes have to be a step to justice. Our votes have to be about ensuring that all humanity can live with dignity. And if we're speaking about immigration, understanding that immigrants built this nation, that immigrants continue to do a lot of the jobs that many of us so-called citizens don't want to do, that there are corporations and entities that are making a killing of not being forced to properly compensate those so-called illegal immigrants. And just the terminology that we use, don't dehumanize people. That we can vote people into power who will make foreign policies that will not harm other nations and destabilize their governments and then force people to flee their homes. No one really wants to flee their home. People are just looking for the same thing you're looking for: safety, access to education, access to good paying jobs or opportunities to be entrepreneurs, access to quality health care. And we can all have those things if we work together and unify as one. We must stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. And we are in difficult times. Will you stand up for what is right? Will you have the courage of your convictions to do what is right for everyone and not just secure power for the few? There's so much more that I want to say, but I believe that most of you watching this, you know the difference between right and wrong. You know the difference between a leader who can lead with integrity and a power-hungry leader who just wants to win. And the question is, win at what cost? And you want to ask these questions up and down the ballot. Should power just be in the hands of just a select few? Or should we open up the gates and allow every person in this community, in our nation, to exercise their power as human beings? Today, you and I stand on the shoulders of many who have come before us. As an African American woman, I understand the blood, sweat, and tears of my ancestors. I understand the blood, sweat, and tears of women. I understand the blood, sweat, and tears of African Americans. I understand the blood, sweat, and tears of Hispanic Americans. I understand the terror that gripped me as I saw children being separated from their parents, and understanding that if we can do it to one and be quiet, we can do it to others. I understand history and what happens when good people cower in fear and choose not to get into good trouble. Let that not be what happens tomorrow on November 5th, 2024 in the United States of America. Let us send an overwhelmingly loud and clear and decisive point that we want to embrace our common humanity, that there is a different way to be, and it's not about the oppression of other people. Alice Walker said, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. So for those of you who are saying, what difference does my vote make? It makes a huge difference. Of course your voice makes a difference. And voting is just one aspect of it. First, you get the people into position, and then you lean on them to make the right decisions. But first, you've got to vote, and you've got to get people into these positions of power that will listen to us, that are not just about their own selfish needs. Citizens of the United States of America, citizens of Bell County, the time is now. Take time off work if you need to tomorrow. Get to the polls early. Stand in line for as long as it takes. Pack a snack or two. I'm sure there's going to be water at many of the polling sites, at least in Texas where it has not been banned yet. And understand that you have the power. Collectively, we have the power. And we can create a different nation and a different world. Thank you for joining us on Rethinking Freedom. We welcome you to join us again next week, 7 a.m. Central Time. Go vote.